Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have an awesome show this week. I'm thinking Lambo, as in we've been driving the Huracán Sterrato. With that, I'm going to bring in senior editor for all things electric. This is definitely not an electric car, John Snyder. That should be your full title. What's up, dude?
Man, I'm good. Yeah, that Lamborghini was something else for sure.
It was. My favorite line that you've had recently was, "Thanks for the Lambo, dude." And then you drove away because we traded cars this week. So good times. We'll talk about that. A couple other things that are, it's not a Sterrato, but they're interesting things. The new GMC Acadia, completely redone for 2025. Very important vehicle for GMC and General Motors as a whole. We also have, in a similar vein, the new Toyota Camry. So with that, we'll also get into our long-termer, the WRX, which is a lot of fun. And we have some news about certain cars that are meeting the end of the road, as well as a company, Fisker, that appears to be about at the end of the road as well. We will spend your money, and this is a good one. So with that, let's jump right into this Lamborghini Huracán Sterrato. So you're probably asking yourself, okay, what is this? I think I know what it is. Let me tell you. In simple terms, it's an off-road Lamborghini Huracan. It's lifted 1.73 inches. You still get the familiar V10 with 602 horsepower, 7-speed transmission. But it's like they took the canvas of the Huracan and did all this kind of crazy, like Mad Max sort of stuff to it. It really does look like a post-apocalyptic vehicle with like the roof rack, the wheel arches that flare out, the off-road lights. There's just so much going on. Basically, doing some research before getting into the car, Lambo showed a concept in the mid-2010s. Then they just said, hey, we're going to build it. Boom, here it is. And it's wild as hell. I had a great time with it. They're only going to make 1,499 of these things, so it's super low. Low run. My kind of like, to sum it up in one sentence, is it's basically just like a flex for like a Lambo owner, because nobody else is really going to have one of these. It's almost like if you're the starting quarterback for, I don't know, the Lions, and like half your offensive line and the punter has Ferraris and Lambos. Well, hey, you've got the Huracán Sterrato, because you're the quarterback. So it's, it definitely is a status thing. One thing I thought is the off-road part of it didn't make it that much easier to drive, which is something I thought would. I just drove, and I can't believe I'm saying this, the Porsche 911 Dakar 2 weeks ago. That was noticeably easier to drive than a normal 911. The view was better. You could look out and just see around you, and you weren't as concerned about, running the sports car over the uneven pavement that is Michigan. And they're very similar themes, I think. 911 Dakar versus Huracán Sterrato. And I think some of it is the proportions as well. But that's, kind of my mini take. What did you think of this thing?
It was interesting. Like you said, it's not particularly easy to drive. You're still like super low to the ground, despite having that little bit of extra clearance. And just there's a lot to get used to in there too. Particularly the one thing that kept throwing me off was the turn indicator, the little toggle on the steering wheel. That like after 2 days driving it, I just started to get the hang of it, but doing that well. I don't know. I tried to keep it in manual mode most of the time, just because it was really, really fun to shift and let the engine sing a little bit. But I will say it was quite comfortable. I was surprised at how just comfortable going down the road it was, even over sort of crummy pavement. Having the extra little bit of suspension and a little bit of extra sidewall was wild. W-rated all-terrain tires. It's still comfortable to drive around. But it takes some effort.
Yeah, the things that were different to me were definitely the design stuff and the aesthetics. It still had that rawness that I felt in Huracans that I've driven before. The steering was familiar, like in Huracan sense, but it was different because these wide, like Bridgestone, I think it's Dueller tires, they added a different vibe to the whole chassis setup. But yeah, I mean, in that sense, the driving was definitely different. And it was easier over broken roads, like train tracks, whatever, just normal daily driving. It was a bit easier. Not as easy as the 911, the car, but, I mean, they are fairly different vehicles, even though there are a lot of similarities. It sounded good, man. Let me tell you. Step on it, in an open road, and it sounds like, missiles are launching from behind your ears. That V10 is still the V10.
Yeah.
Can't see out of it because there's that cover going over the back.
Yeah, you can't see anything, man.
You can't see a thing out of this thing, but yeah, it was bright orange. My son very aptly described it as a tiger car because there's several different liveries you could get. I mean, my guess is if you're buying this Lambo, we'll do whatever you want, frankly, but there's some like sort of options to choose from. We had the orange one with 63 on the front hood. It looked cool as hell, orange. It had the roof rack. I had the different lights on. I did a brief sort of sunset photo shoot, which was cool. Every week, this is the best time of year for like test driving cars. Every week we've had something come through the fleet that's been pretty cool. And I feel like Wednesdays and Thursdays I've just been driving until sunset. So it's a nice hobby to have.
This was a nice car. You just want to take it out and cruise, and it's like not just, your curvy back roads. It was fun to get on the highway with this thing and just, fire it down the straightaway. Great vehicle. In many, many ways. I like I said, I really liked using those pedal shifters. I like column mounted paddle shifters.
Oh, I agree.
Especially when they're, nice and big and you can sort of grab them from anywhere. All the little toggles and switches were neat. I really liked having to flip up the little cover for the
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so many little quirks and details in this car. And yeah, it's just everything about it sort of looks different, feels different, works different, from getting into gear to using the little infotainment screen that is there. But yeah, my kid was also going nuts over this, as were pretty much everyone.
You're a rock star. Yeah.
You'd see truckers, just their face in the side view mirror, just checking you out the whole time you're coming up on them. You get a lot of attention. You park it anywhere. You get people coming up to you and cracking jokes and asking about different things. And yeah, super neat car.
It, flipping up the cover to turn the car on, that's just so cool when you have to do that. That is a pretty neat element. The way I kind of, to sum it up, the driving is better and also worse than you might imagine, just due to like visibility. I really, again, like the design. And I've been lucky to drive a few Lambos as I kind of look back. I drove a regular Huracan back in 2016 out at Willow Springs, which is for sale. If you have $2.3 million, I believe that's the track is for sale, not the car. Very memorable. And the car was very, very drivable. You would think you'd be very intimidated, but it was very drivable on that track. It was a closed course. So, I mean, all I had to do was basically keep it on the road. It's not like there was any competition elements. But I also drove a McLaren 675 Longtail during that same track session. So it was cool. And I drove a Countach back in it was around that same time. It was a street drive. It was a 90 Countach. So that was pretty wild. Pretty 89, it looks like, as I'm checking my notes here. I
remember buying that poster at the book fair. It's cool.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, I would rank this, it's up there. I still got to probably go with as far as memories. I think it's a little unfair to say this because like this was a street drive. It was a brief street drive. Whereas how do you rank that ahead of a track drive? Willow, right? Right. Or one of the most iconic cars that we all grew up liking. So, I mean, maybe it's third out of the 3 Lambos I drove, but still better than like 99.9% of everything else I've ever driven from an experience standpoint. It's definitely memorable. And it makes me want to get in this is another low run car, but the new Countach, just to see how that, I mean, seriousness, to see how it kind of holds up and carries that sort of Lamborghini standard. So it was cool, man.
Yeah, I will say, like, after I got out of the car, after I drove it from your house to my house, I got out and I felt sort of odd. My skin was vibrating. Yeah. And there's only been one other car that's sort of given me that weird sort of buzzing sensation. And that was the Ferrari 458 Italia. Wow. You take that out on the road for a while and just sort of meld man and machine for a bit and get out and you just feel different afterward. And yeah, definitely had that experience with this. And it's not something that happens often, if ever.
It was definitely more intense than the Maserati MC20 that I drove last fall in many ways. But
it was a little more forgiving than the Maserati too.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
I felt sort of a lot more comfortable, adding power through corners and things like that. I mean, this all-wheel drive system on this is pretty good. Yeah, too. So
that's a really good point too. It really sorted everything out, you know, very smoothly. And if there was ever a car where you think they might maybe either get too cute or not think it through, it would be this thing. But no, it was very compliant, very agreeable. So, yeah,
gonna miss it.
Gonna miss it. We are gonna have a thoughts piece. I think we have a podcast, you're listening to it, and then we're looking to have a road test coming up later on in the summer, so check all that out. It's pretty cool. So there's really no way to transition over to the Toyota Camry, but hey, everything we drive isn't a supercar and they're all important in their own way. I drove the new XSE trim. This is the 2025 model at all-wheel drive. It's basically the top of the line Camry for the new model year. I think it's very much worth it. The car I drove cost a little over $45,000, which is right about the average new car cost in the United States. And when you think about it, it's a hybrid that gets 44 combined miles per gallon. That's spectacular. It's a roomy interior. This one had the red leather. The trunk is huge too. I had camping chairs, golf clubs, and baseball equipment in there all at once. We're finally wrapping up like the spring sports season for my son, so I'm not like a rolling like sporting goods store with all these press cars. But when I drove this car, it made me think, if you need some space, you know, whatever your family situation is, you should not overlook the Camry. Like, don't just run and go get the latest crossover. Don't just be like, oh, I'll go get the RAV4 or whatever. Look at the Camry. There's a little bit, just because you're driving a car, a sedan, there is that degree of, I hate to say sportiness, but just because there's so few sedans, it's almost by default, this is sporty. But a very nice, well-equipped, roomy car.
Yeah, and especially, you know, with those X, you know, appended trims, those are a little bit sportier than the rest of the lineup. So you might be onto something there. But yeah, I haven't driven it yet. I was supposed to do like a winter drive in it this past winter, but then they canceled it because we didn't have any snow.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Kind of a bummer of a winter, but yeah, I mean, it's sort of a do everything sedan, especially, as a hybrid with, that's phenomenal fuel economy. You can drive it, have a little bit of fun with it. It's not completely boring. And then, yeah, like you said, room for people and all the things that come along with people, especially when you've got kids.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, the XSE trim, I think, is definitely the most attractive trim. I mean, design is subjective, but this one gives you, a little more of the design elements, special 19-inch wheels as opposed to some of the base ones that really give it a sleek kind of look. And you get a lot of stuff too. There's a premium package, which is about $4,000, and that will give you the 9-speaker JBL audio. You get some more safety features like a panoramic camera and moonroof. I like those. Yeah, it's interesting. I wrote in my notes that I'd probably scratch those to get it to more like $41,000. I don't know. I really kind of like panoramic cameras the more I use them. And the moonroof is really nice in the sedan. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go ahead and edit through my story here. But point being is you could get it much cheaper, even in the XSE trim, if you just kind of are a little more ruthless with the options. And the refresh for 2025 is it's all hybrid. So there's that. They got rid of the V6 and the TRD trim, which Riswick wrote this in one of either his first drive or his buying guide. Like, we all like those, but it's hard to really say how many other people did. My guess is it's not like a manual transmission as far as options, but it's a little more niche than some of this other stuff, especially when you're a Camry. And also the other part too is the design aesthetics. It's not a crazy makeover, but it looks a bit like the Prius now, which is the new sort of family design. And I like that a lot. Toyotas are attractive now.
Yeah, definitely. The little bit of makeovers they've been doing have all been going in the right direction across the lineup, basically.
Yeah. And also, I would say the last couple Camrys I've driven have had the red interior with, again, a lot of leather in it. It's a nice interior. I would, the color won't be for everybody, but I would say if you're looking at a Camry, at least look at this option because it's nicely done. I didn't love the infotainment. Toyota infotainments the last few years they're not the worst. They're definitely not the best, though. I think they're a little hard to use, hard to figure out. I would need more time to figure out if I truly dislike this one or it's just a little harder to pick up. But I didn't love that either. So, but that's a Camry. I guess now that we've gone from Lambo to Camry, we'll go to Acadia. What was the new Acadia like?
It was, it's much more like the Traverse now. It's a little bigger, but we talked about the Traverse a few episodes ago, and had the sort of the off-roady trim and the street trim. Acadia is doing the same thing. It's got the AT4 and the Denali, but they only have one other trim. The base trim is the elevation trim, so it doesn't go down quite as far as the Traverse does, but in many ways very, very similar cars. Same platform, using the same suspension. Getting from one to the other, it was super familiar, especially now that they're very comparable in size, except for the interior design in the Acadia is much superior. It's really a really nice interior in both the AT4 and the Denali. The Denali had more, power this, sort of thing. But even the AT4, which is considerably less money, still had a really nice interior and fairly roomy. I could sit almost comfortably. If I put, I'm 6 foot, so put the driver's seat in the perfect position, put the second row seat in a nice comfortable position behind that, and then got in the third row behind that. My knees were just touching. I could ask the me in the front 2 rows to sort of adjust a little bit. They'd still be comfortable, and then the person in the third row would be comfortable too. For kids, it'd be fine either way, and there's plenty of headroom. The Acadia only comes with captain's chairs. There's no bench for that. But just like with the Traverse, the off-road version was my favorite. The AT4, the Acadia AT4 was really fun and really good on the road, super comfortable. And then, we actually bombed down some dirt trails and through loose sand, and put an off-road mode for that. It allows for a little more wheel slippage, and you could actually accelerate through the sand. Whereas if you put it back into normal mode, the traction control would just sort of slow you down, thinking it was, just completely losing traction. And then GMC brought out some sort of earth moving device and dug up these sort of trenches, ruts, so we could get wheels off the ground, which is more than pretty much anyone will do in their Acadia, but it did it just fine. Really good sort of torque vectoring all-wheel drive in the AT4, and then just a fabulous suspension, really good suspension in the AT4. And the Denali, if you get it with the 20-inch wheels, the 22-inch wheels, you get a version of that suspension as well, tuned differently, but the higher sort of frequency-based suspension. But it's a really good suspension. You don't get a lot of body motion. You don't feel the harshness from the roads, and it just adapts really well. You can hit ruts going at speed, and the car doesn't get upset at all. But very, very nice. The interior design is beautiful. The exterior design is really nice too. It's a little more truckish than before. Taller grille. In the back, it's got the quad exhaust tips that are sort of squared off. They said they were inspired by the C8 Corvette, which I can see that. The cargo space is huge. Just absolutely enormous. I think probably best in the segment for behind the third row. You can put a lot of people in it, and a lot of their stuff, and everyone would be comfortable. And with the Acadia over the Traverse, you've got just a nicer interior, a little more thoughtful design, a little less hard plastics that you're touching. It's a few grand more if you're comparing, trims, apples to apples. But you'd have to decide how much, the extra plastics and stuff in the Traverse would bum you out. But it definitely feels more premium in the Acadia.
Kind of reading your story and going on, what you're saying, it feels like the Acadia is finally sort of achieving its potential. I'll be interested to see if maybe sales go up and if GMC could, maybe steal a little bit of market share with this vehicle. Full disclosure, my wife drives a 17 Acadia, and it was an interesting model for the time because it was kind of a tweener. They made it a little bit shorter than the Traverse, which was enormous of that generation. And now I think that's kind of a little bit. It was, I think, a little bit smaller than the Buick. Blanking on the Buick, but the Buick 3-row crossover. And now it's like when you're buying this vehicle, you don't want something that's a little bit like a Land Rover, Range Rover Sport. You want a ton of space, So I think it makes sense to make it larger. The interior in the old Traverse and then our Acadia was always it was good for 2017, but it's not great for now. It definitely felt like the tail end of the 2000s interiors, just it was a little bit nicer. You could even see it with the refresh, which, I think I forget if this was a press loan or just like a loaner from the dealer getting the oil changed. You could see the upgrades with the infotainment and better materials right away. So I'm interested to get inside this one. I mean, it's, I think by giving it that kind of Sierra look, we've already seen that on the Terrain. It looks truly more premium. And I'm also kind of interested that the off-road element, in the past, it really wasn't like something that was ever very capable. This sounds like there is, not that most Acadia owners would use this, but it sounds like there's a little bit of performance, sort of what we're seeing from off-road performance, like what you're seeing from like Hyundai and Kia with their off-road trims.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of ground clearance. I think the AT4 gives you an extra 1.2 inches, which, it's already isn't a ton of ground clearance, but you get those all-terrain tires that don't really affect the drivability on the street. Still quiet, still comfortable, still stable. But yeah, it's just, between that and the suspension and the all-wheel drive, it feels like you're not going to get stuck anywhere. And if you do, come across a fallen branch or something, you're not going to have a problem getting over it.
Yeah,
that's that sort of thing. There's recovery hooks in case you get stuck. And it looks cool. It looks super cool. It's got the marker lights on the wheel arches, and the big wheels do a lot to. The big tires do a lot to give it some presence. But then, you get inside and it's pretty luxurious. You've got really great tech. You've got a huge infotainment screen running Google built in. You've got a digital driver display and a digital instrument panel. And you can take your Google Maps from your infotainment screen and send it right in front of you in the driver's display. So you're, got your directions right in front of you. And then you can have something else going on the infotainment screen. You don't have to keep looking over there and switching back and forth between menus, which is nice when you're driving on a first drive and in an unfamiliar place. And then, Super Cruise is optional across the entire lineup too, and Super Cruise just keeps getting better. Yeah,
I drove it. I have the Suburban that you dropped off when we traded the Lambo. I haven't Super Cruised in it yet, but I intend to. And I did Super Cruise in the new Equinox EV and the new Silverado EV about 3 weeks ago, and was very impressed. They just keep getting it better and better, evolving it, making it more, smarter without overselling it too.
Yeah, and they're adding many miles of roads. I think they're close to 750,000 miles of highways in the U.S. and Canada now that it works on, and a lot of those are 2-lane highways and stuff now, and highways that aren't controlled. They've got intersections and stuff, and it will make you take over when you're approaching a busier intersection or something like that. But it gives you a little nudge through the seat, the sort of haptic vibration in the seat that is sort of a really nice way, in fact, to get a driver's attention. It's better than beeps or flashing lights, in my opinion. It doesn't freak out the passengers. And you can't miss it. So yeah, Super Cruise. I dig it.
All right. Well, the opposite, I would say, of Super Cruise is driving a stick shift Subaru WRX, which is in our long-term garage. You had it recently. And, we've got some fun summer driving stuff coming up with it. But what did you do with it for your time with the Rex?
Well, Byron and I did that comparison between our long-termer and the TR, the WRX TR, which is actually going away. But so we did that with it, and that was really interesting because there's not a lot different with it. There's no power difference. There's really no visual difference. It's suspension, wheels, and tires basically. Does the bulk of the work on the TR. So we did that. You can read about that. I think maybe you and Byron have even talked about that on the podcast already. And then let's see, I took it up north.
Okay.
I drove it up to my cottage. I did all the regular daily driving duties along with running out and having fun with it, just because I just absolutely in love with it. But yeah, I took it up north. This one doesn't have eyesight, so no adaptive cruise control. Didn't miss it as much as I thought I would. And then, rolling at, the speed limit up in northern Michigan is 75. So, you can guess how fast I was going. But, that was the only time where I was like, I wish maybe there was one more gear, or that was geared a little bit differently, because those revs just sort of sit pretty high up in the rev band and just sort of groans. And I feel like, if I could there was one more gear, it'd be a little bit quieter. I'd be getting better fuel economy. I'd be a little less tired at the end of the drive. But other than that, pretty good road trip car. I was it brought me back. When I had my 04 WRX, I took it on a couple cross country road trips, and it doesn't, first blush, doesn't seem like the ideal road trip car, but it'll handle pretty much any road that you're likely to come across on a journey like that. Whether it's dirt roads or you get rain or snow or whatever. It just gets better then. but yeah, I was able to fit a ton of stuff in it. A lot of room in the trunk. I did, bring a bunch of stuff up to the cottage. So, packed a bunch of stuff in there and had room left over. And, yeah, I really, really like this WRX. It's so good to drive. It's so playful. So, it's just right on the border of being, I don't want to say it's uncomfortable, but the suspension's pretty stiff in this thing. That was one thing the TR did really well, was it sort of provided a lot smoother drive, which was not something I expected. But yeah, I'm completely enamored with this generation of WRX.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting another swing through it this year with some summer tires on it, and just the warm weather. Kind of heat up those tires, have some fun, really feel what it's like as a sports sedan. I drove it in the dead of winter when it was a winter beater, is what it was, and it was great at that. It's fun driving a stick shift car with those winter tires through the snow. It was really performed like a champ. But I'm ready for the other side of the coin. So looking forward for that this summer. So
you're gonna have fun.
All right, let's talk some news. It is in the last probably week or so, we have heard it is the end of the road for the Nissan GTR. The end of the line for the Volvo S60, and it appears to be the end of the line for the current 718 Boxster Caymans, which the Porsche sports cars, obviously, which will then become electric, is what we're hearing. So of the three that are, likely departing, there's a bit to unpack here. Having recently driven the 718, that one actually, I keep thinking, it sounds like there's going to be a little bit of an overlap. So if you still want to get like an internal combustion 718, there will be some time to do that before they phase over to the electric. While I'm excited about the electric, 718, I kind of think that might be a car where I think there's a strong case to still having a sporting ICE model for those who just want that summer top-down experience and that kind of sound, that visceral feel. To me, it's not in no way any sort of commentary on the viability of electric cars. I just look at this as like it's a sports car. And I think having recently driven the 718, I've been very taken with it. You can check out, I had a column that I put up towards the end of, it was like June 1st or something. It was like my summer kickoff column. It's just, I think there's a time and a place for things like that. And I think that's, again, that's one that kind of hits the most for me.
Yeah, it's not something, especially in the snow belt, it's not something you're going to drive all year round.
Yeah.
So, you're not going to, generally not going to daily drive it. So the gas, the emissions thing is a little more of a moot point. Those cars aren't the biggest offenders. And the thing that worries me about it is, how much is it going to cost, and is going electric going to put it out of, price it out of people's reach for people who would, want a fun, affordable Porsche. That concerns me. I do think also, the Boxster is a cool, fun fit for the car too. So yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I don't mind the internal combustion thing in it, and it does seem like it should probably be the lowest on the priority list for Porsche.
Now, you can check out the spy shots we have of the 718 Boxster EV, which shows a pretty good looking car. I'm sure it's going to be great to drive.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you like, like the Macan or something, the Macan EV, you like that sort of Mission E, I believe that's their like design language. It's going to look great, and it's going to drive like crazy, like bonkers. So, I mean, and again, this all comes from a leaked dealer document. So, more on this to come. It sounds like the platform is flexible. So if they did decide to keep an ICE option, they probably could. So we'll see on that front. But less likely to be around at all, as reported, as the GTR is done. This is not shocking in any way. It's actually been a minute since I've driven the GTR.
Same.
Godzilla is always a lot of work to drive when you talk about cars that, really kind of beat you up. I drove one in 14. It was, I think this might sound crazy, it may have been the first press car I drove at Autoblog.
Neat.
Yeah. So
it's been longer than that for me. It was back in my winding road days when I drove the.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least one of my more recent times, it was with the current publication. But we did have one in 17 or 18, somewhere in that late teens. And I think we all got through it, or some of us did. But I mean, at this point in its current form, it's definitely a dinosaur. We'll see what they do next. Maybe they decide to bring it back, use the name for an electric sports car. That could be cool, obviously.
I don't see Nissan abandoning that nameplate. I mean, it's a very strong and proud part of their heritage.
Yeah.
If you go to like their, I was lucky enough to go to their Zama collection in Japan and see a lot of their old cars, and super, super proud of the GTR moniker. And I don't see them abandoning that entirely at any point ever.
Man, I remember
I'm sure,
17 years is a long time though for the current run.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you've got a good iconic car that's sort of rare, low volume, you can kind of get away with that.
Yeah.
It's got its own sort of lore and story to it. And it's been around for a while. I mean, how long did they keep the last generation Z around?
Yeah, that's true too. That is, that car aged and aged and aged. And they, even the all new one still maintained some elements. I forget how they sliced it up of the old one to allow them to do it. Because for companies to do things like the Z or the Z, like the BMW Z4 and the Supra, many companies have to team up. It's very tough to do it alone in these things. Like somebody does the chassis and the engine, and somebody else, they each design it their own way, or somebody does the chassis, somebody else does the engine. So Nissan kind of, I think, a little bit ham and egg this current one. And then they did what they had to do is from a styling perspective, and they improved the dynamics. So it's, it's something that's much more contemporary. So, the S60's gone too. We had a long-termer S60 at Auto Week. We had a long-term S1 here at Autoblog, S60 here at Autoblog. So it's always a very premium sedan. But I think the way Volvo is trying to align their lineup, the S60 for now doesn't fit in its current form. So they had to move on from it.
Yeah. A little sad, but I mean, not totally surprising. But I'll miss that. That was, I had fun in our long termer.
Yeah.
The plug-in hybrid system, that interesting plug-in hybrid system. But yeah, I mean, they're bringing in brand new electric stuff that they're going to find slots for all of these current customers in that lineup. It'll be interesting to see when the EX90 and the EX30 are all here, where the S60 owners sort of shake out in terms of that.
Yeah. So speaking of end of line for cars, Fisker went bankrupt on Monday, to no one's surprise. They've been warning the industry about this since like February. It's sort of just like the sequel to the first Fisker. Their products looked interesting. Henrik Fisker talked a great game, but at the end of the day, they just ran out of money. You look at the filing. The car business, you need hundreds of millions, if not billions, and their assets were listed. Here we go. The assets filed in the paperwork in Delaware court were between 500 million to 1 billion. And their liabilities were actually less than that, but it certainly wasn't enough to keep any sort of a positive, money churn, the cash flow going in the direction that consistently needed to go. They had some weird recalls, stuff like that. They put some of their cars, they did like a fire sale for a while. It did remind me a lot of the first Fisker, where they had like, I believe a bunch of their cars got destroyed in like a hurricane, and then they had some highly publicized fires, and they just literally ran into, literally a hurricane and figuratively a hurricane. And that's happened to them twice. It seems like, I'm not surprised by this at all. They join Endurance, Lordstown Endurance, in the current scrap heap of EV makers. And,
it's so hard when you don't have, a whole other lineup of cars that can sort of support you while you get, your new EV off the ground. And it costs a lot. It's risky. I was hoping Fisker would do it, but ran into some problems. software problems, lots of different things. So I'll be interested to see, if anyone ends up with their assets again.
That's true
karma, too. It kept going. I don't know if the Ocean might not be as sort of iconic enough of a vehicle for anyone to sort of do any continuation of that. But
I give them credit in that they went for a more mainstream vehicle, like the Ocean is a crossover that a lot of people could probably get into, versus the Karma, which was basically a luxury sedan that was, competing against the Model S at the time,
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a situation too where I don't really think anybody needs to swoop in and try and get the Ocean, whereas, lots of companies actually literally did their own spin on the Karma, including Bob Lutz, I think he put a V8 in one and sold it as something. So, we'll see. They did have a fairly interesting, potential lineup of vehicles, but they never got them out. And then the Ocean received some pretty bad reviews too. Yeah.
I mean, it's tough when, money is the biggest thing. And when you start off with the affordable car, it seems like the successful startups launch with their, crazy halo car, find some deep pockets and, make some money with that, build their reputation up with that, and then from there work their way down the lineup to the more affordable ones. But yeah, it was. I was hoping they could, sort of upend it and start with the affordable one and work their way up. Because we need more affordable EVs, but just wasn't in the cards this time.
It reminds me a lot of the early 20th century when a lot of these sort of car barons would, like the Dodge brothers or, people would go off, start their own company. Well, Dodge worked out. That's a bad example. But like other, guys of that time, they'd start off, they'd have a car company, they'd build one car, and then they'd run out of money. And then they'd go back and work for General Motors or somebody, or they'd get bought out by General Motors. That's kind of how GM came to be, as they collected all these other car companies and brands. But yeah, we're at this kind of reset of the car business. We're trying to figure out, what will be driving these cars that we're all driving. What will be the mix of EVs? What will be hybrids? What will be still gasoline, diesel, et cetera. And companies, they're having a tough time without enough collateral to make these, these risky plays work. They don't have enough time and money, many of them. Makes what Rivian has done all the more impressive.
Yeah. And
Tesla.
The OG Tesla. I think, but yeah, again, those, they started with more expensive vehicles and worked their way down. But that's what sort of Fisker did the old way the first time around, and it didn't work. So I don't know.
Yeah. Do you remember that Tesla did actually sue Fisker 16 years ago, saying that they basically stole trade secrets. It was crazy.
Familiar.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a legal wrangle that didn't end up going anywhere. I remember covering it at the time, but
there was a lot of trade secret warfare going on with Tesla over the years.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see what's next for Henrik Fisker. He's certainly, this is his second car company that's gone under, but he's also one of the better designers of the 90s and 2000s, Aston Martin, BMW, Mercedes. So
yeah, I was really looking forward to some of the designs he'd drawn up. That Fisker Alaska in particular looked really cool.
I agree.
Would love to have seen that.
All right. We'll close up the news section with, did you just happen to see the Le Mans special edition Cadillac CT5V Blackwings?
No.
Pretty cool. Let's see. Check it out. They're on, pictures are on the site, stories on the site. It just kind of celebrates Cadillac's racing heritage. And they have the cars drawing on some of the history going all the way back to different prototypes. And one of the older Cadillac racers from the early 50s, which is one of my sort of favorite generation of Cadillacs. Yeah, check out those pictures. They're pretty good. Cadillac
the Le Monstre.
There you go. There you go. Cadillac Series 61. It's a deeper cut, but it was one of the first Cadillacs to go to Le Mans in 1950 itself. Briggs Cunningham set this up. So pretty cool. I like these kind of deep cuts. It's almost like, it's summer. It's the summer solstice, actually, but football is not too far away, and I like it when teams roll out these like old throwback jerseys and uniforms. That's kind of how I look at this stuff. So, all right, let's spend some money. Hello, I'm a late 50s empty nester. I have a daily driver is a 2018 Ford F-150, which we tow our camper with and carry bikes and kayaks in. So it's a great time of year for that. But I'm looking for a fun, sporty used car in the $15,000 to $20,000 range that has to be a manual, and it either has to be a convertible or he needs a sunroof. He wants the sun to shine. So there we go. Live in Iowa, so the winter is a thing for sure. But I really would like to daily this car. So fair enough. All right. I'm thinking Miata, Ford Mustang EcoBoost. His wife has a Mach-E, so wouldn't mind another Mustang. I can see some threads with that. Or his impractical but fun choice, an early 2000s Porsche Boxster. The maintenance scares me, though. I know I'm probably forgetting some awesome choices that have a manual and are in some way open air. Looking forward to hearing from you, and I love your podcast. Hey, thank you for writing. So I'm going to just tee this up right away. This is not the most responsible answer. I'm going to go with the early 2000s Boxster, though. I have really been liking that car specifically this summer. One of my neighbors has a red one. I think it captures that early 2000s styling. I think they're still relatively affordable. If you step up just even to the next generation of Boxsters and Caymans, the price does go up exponentially. So, I mean, I think these are still a fairly good deal, whereas the other ones still they're in that kind of tweener of not quite old enough to be discounted, but still kind of new enough to be contemporary. So if you go all the way back and get the OG, I think you still can get a decent deal. It's something I feel like I kind of want to do before the price goes up. And also I think just the look and vibe of these things, their interiors hold up pretty well. Just whenever I see one, I make it my business to kind of look inside. If you look at Haggerty, they have a nice price evaluation tool, and you can kind of see what, where the current values actually stand. But in my opinion, the first generation, which the code name is 986, is still actually a little bit of a better value than the 987, which followed it. So that's what I would do. That is purely based on the fact that I really like Boxsters and Caymans right now.
Yeah.
I think, thinking a little more practically, a Mustang EcoBoost would be fine with the Mach-E as well. Although, you're going to need some snow tires for that in an Iowa winter. I think you also, I will say this, as emotional and fun as the Boxster is, it will be your toughest winter driver. So that's just something straight up you got to figure out. And I will make that my sort of full disclosure and final thought. So what do you think, John?
I was originally going to agree with you. That's, my first instinct. And, I probably should just go with my gut on this. But, give me a little more thought. Mini Cooper convertible. Okay. Front wheel drive. So you could get, a little more use out of it. Especially if you get some snow tires for it. Really fun. And something a little different. But definitely sporty, different kind of sporty, but definitely sporty. And then too easy not to say it. A Wrangler. Get a Wrangler.
Yeah.
You know, you can get the convertible stuff. Maybe not the kind of sporty you were thinking of, but might be able to do some of the duties of your Ford. You definitely soak up some sun in that, and definitely use it year round. Just a thought. But yeah, the Boxster is, that's where my heart would land too.
The other thing is the price for those are still reasonable enough that you could get some sort of winter driver. You know, find like a all-wheel drive Ford Edge or something to get you through with heated seats, you know, that's 10 years old, that will help you survive maybe, say, December to late February. Like, the way the winters have been around here lately, you could probably drive a Boxster, you know, through much of it. Iowa strikes me as, even though we're farther north here in Michigan and we're surrounded by Great Lakes and Canada, Iowa strikes me as having a harsher winter just because of like the winds coming off, maybe the flatlands. I'm totally making that up, but it strikes me as one where like maybe the water even helps us to have a less harsh winter these days. I don't know. But I would definitely consider that, because as much as I would love to go out and drive a Boxster right now in late November when it's sleeting and, you know, who knows, that would give me a little bit of pause. So, yeah. All right. Let's see. Any summer things you want to highlight, John, in your lifestyle things? I will do this. Instead of going with what I've been drinking lately, what I've been drinking lately is a late harvest Riesling from Black Star Farms. It's a winery up north in Michigan. And this week I made a huge batch of pesto pasta, which we've been eating a couple days a week. So that's sort of my like final thoughts life thing. You could look up recipes, like New York Times cooking app has a great one. You can find it, just Google it. Or in this case, I totally went the easy way out. We used some pesto from a jar from Costco and just some curly noodles. And we have been growing basil this year. So I kind of ripped those up and threw that on top with some cheese. And like I said, a glass of white wine. Nice summer eating for the solstice. So I will throw it over to you. Educate our readers in something.
Huge pesto fan.
Yeah.
And you can get a basil plant at Trader Joe's for like $3, $4, and they're huge. Mm-hmm. I've got one right now, and I use that all the time. We've been making our own pizza.
Yeah, it's good for that.
We've finally found a recipe that we like, and we've been slowly perfecting it, perfecting the dough. So that's fun, letting it rise and waiting and proofing and all that stuff. But yeah, we had pesto this past week as well. Really delicious. Also, right now is a good time for, again, going the pasta route, anything with like fresh tomatoes.
Yeah.
And asparagus. You can still do asparagus right now. We actually had a pasta with tomatoes and asparagus, sauteed the tomatoes and the asparagus together and tossed it all with like rigatoni. It was really good, nice and sort of refreshing. The recipe called for more butter than we put in, so we held off a little bit on that. Otherwise, it would have been a little too rich for this heat. But man, I want to make like a what is it, aglio-olio?
Yeah, that's a good one. Super simple,
like
3-4
right now,
ingredients. Yeah. That's a good one to make this time of year too. When something that's that hits, but it's not too heavy for these stifling summer nights. So,
and back to the pesto thing. We make a pesto pasta usually with a farfalle, and we'll take grape at the very end. We'll take grape tomatoes, halved, and some arugula leaves.
Oh yeah,
and just sort of toss them in at the end, so they're fresh. They sort of wilt just a little bit, give up just a little bit of their moisture, and blend really well and taste really good with that pesto.
All right. Well, consider adding some pesto pasta to your summer meal planning. If you enjoy the show, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the podcasts. Send us your Spend My Monies. We'd love to spend some more money on Boxsters and Caymans if that's what you're looking for. Be safe out there. Enjoy summer, and we'll see you next week.